Hey guys, my name is Matt Hernandez, and today we're taking tennis action shots. We're out here at one of the local tennis courts. We wanted one that looked a little bit nicer. You can see this one's kind of cracked in some areas, and there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 courts. So those are a little bit nicer over here, but there's also a building behind us. And so I knew I was gonna be shooting these wide angle, and even though that's gonna distort things and make the building smaller in the background, because the sun is back here. So I'm gonna have my athlete right here, kind of stretching to hit the ball. So I'm gonna have the sun behind her, acting as a rim light. So really, if I wanted to, I could probably only do one light here. I do have 3, and I'm gonna explain all of them, but this is my spot, okay? And so I've pulled her off of those cracks because I'm gonna underexpose the background by using high-speed sync to raise my shutter speed. I've got a piece of black tape here to mark my spot where she's gonna be. We do have just kind of a boring blue sky, but if we underexpose it, it can make it look more interesting. The sun might be a little bit too high. It's about 11 o'clock. For it to be in the picture, but it might creep into a few. So we've got that kind of acting as a hair light because it's gonna be directly behind her. And then we've got 2 rim lights here. So we have the rim light behind her with the deep focus reflector at full power. We've got the one kind of to her right. These are pretty much, they're like side lights, not really rim lights necessarily. They're gonna be brighter because we have a medium octa with diffusion on it. So we also have the deflector plate on the inside to get a little bit higher output. They're all at full power, but it's gonna be a lower output because of the diffusion, because diffusion is going to spread the light out, it's going to make it softer, but you're also going to lose power with it. These deep focus reflectors don't have any diffusion on them because we want as high output as possible because it is in the middle of the day. So I always tell people this when they ask me any kind of questions about photography in general, I light from back to front. So what that means is whether I'm inside or outside, if in this case, we're outside. So I took one ambient light picture and no lights turned on, and that way I could get the background exactly how I want it. Then I started turning the lights on one by one. I turned one rim light on, took a picture, turned the second rim light on, took a picture, took them together, and then turned the fill on last. I built up from back to front. That way you can see one at a time. And when you start with the background, it's a lot easier because you get it perfect, and then you just gotta turn the lights on and adjust the power. Whereas if you turn all the lights on at once, you're gonna start guessing, you're gonna fumble around with your settings, it's gonna take way longer. And a lot of times what happens is when you do that, people get frustrated, they know they've got a client there waiting, so they just kind of settle for the settings what they are, even though they may not be perfect. And then you end up with a shot that's not exactly what you want. So when you start with that strategy, back to front, background, rim light, main light, or fill light, then it's gonna be, that's a fail safe. It's gonna work every single time. So anytime I'm shooting athletes, I wanna make sure they're comfortable and safe, obviously, number one. I don't wanna make sure they're not scared about hitting me or anything like that. So I always ask, if the movement that we wanna do is, what they're comfortable with, what they're best at, that kind of thing. So with this, she pretty much said she could do anything that we wanted her to. So we had her kind of stretching with one hand. Those are the pictures I like the best. So we had her like take a step and then kind of go into it like this. I had somebody throwing her the balls, bouncing them to her. So she was having to get a little bit lower. And I had her do several in a row. We probably did 15 to 20 in a row. And the reason for that is because when you do one picture with an athlete doing an action shot, and then you look at it and analyze it, show them, there's no rhythm involved. Whenever I do, 10 to 20 in a row, they get into a rhythm, I get into a rhythm, the person throwing the ball, if there's a ball involved, gets into a rhythm, and that way everybody gets more comfortable, and the athlete's gonna kind of forget maybe that they're getting their picture made. And that's key because you want them to look like they're actually playing. That's hard in a scenario like this because they're not. So it's hard for them to get in that frame of mind. You wanna make them work a little bit because you get a little bit more intensity in their face and everything like that. And I wanted to get as close as I could to the racket. So I've got a 24 to 70 lens. I was at 1/5000th of a second, f7.1, ISO 200. So I scooted as close as I could. I kind of had her pose and hold the racket where she was gonna be. So I told her basically to take a cross step and then angle over this. And I wanted the guy that was throwing the balls to have it right at the tape, all right? So I knew exactly where it was gonna be. And so I knew exactly how close I could be because this wide angle lens shooting at 24 millimeters, when the racket's close to me like that in the ball, it's gonna look big and distorted. And that's gonna be cool for an athlete because you want them to look heroic. So that's another reason why I was down low like that all the way on the ground, which is why I love cameras like this because you can shoot up like that and wide. We moved courts to the nicer ones now because I was gonna get some of her serving, and we wanted the sky behind her. So the sun's gonna help actually out with fill now. So we spun her around, and then I have to shift my lights. So I've got them still in a triangle. I've got my 2 edge lights, and the reason that one's up and pointed down is to make sure that it gets on her face and not underneath. So I wanted it to come down, like angled a little bit, like 45 degrees down rather than shooting up. And also her arm was in it too, so I didn't want to create any shadow. So I wanted to make sure it was high enough that that wouldn't be a factor. So we've got everything at full power still. We've got the 2 deep focus, and we've got this one with the octa for fill, and then the sun's helping out a little bit too. I had to pull this back though because of the shadow, because I'm here. So if you think about it, the sun is behind me, so it's gonna make a shadow that can creep into the frame. You wanna obviously avoid that if you can. So I had to pull the octa back, which that's where the sun's gonna come in handy and help that a little bit. I took some of her throwing the ball up. I took some of her actually hitting it. I wanted to get the ball in the frame. That's the rule, the main rule of sports photography, whether you're taking action shots in a game or pose shots like this, 2 eyes in the ball. So wanna make sure, and that can be broken every now and then, but that's, you know, the general rule. So we wanna try to get the ball in it, which can be hard. So I had to scoot back a little bit more than I thought, but that and the high-speed sync will allow me to do that, to get that in the frame. And shooting wide angle also. I've still got my 24-70 lens on here too. The key thing with this type of shoot is that you have to have strobes that will enable high-speed sync, which allows your camera to go over the natural sync speed, which a lot of Canon and Nikons are 1/200, 1/250th of a second. I think even some of them are like 1/60th. This one is 1/400th, which helps, but that's still not fast enough to freeze action. You need to be at least minimum 1/1000th of a second. If it's a slow motion, maybe 1/800th, but I would say 1/1000th is the rule. I always try to go faster. Like today, I was shooting at 1/4000th and 1/5000th. So that's gonna get it nice and sharp pretty much no matter what you're doing, definitely with tennis. It can be frustrating, it can be hard. I've done this a lot. It takes a lot of practice. The downfall, these look cooler than games, but the downfall of it is you only get 1 shot. In games, you can hold the shutter down, and you know, you can make sure you get that peak action, because that's what you want, is peak action. You want them hitting the ball or getting ready to hit the ball or jumping at their peak height, you know, that kind of thing. And that is hard to do. You can't just jump into it. You have to practice. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll shoot natural light first with no strobes, just shoot the whole sequence on high speed continuous, and that way I can see what frame I need to take, where they're gonna look the most athletic. Then I turn my strobes on, and I know how to time it. And sometimes you have to take 50 frames to get the right one. And I always wait till the end of the shoot to do the action shots. That way I give them a lot of nice portraits, that kind of thing. We're gonna show you some of those too, some other shots that we do here, but with similar setups. But I always do those first and then leave the high risk stuff to the end. And then I warn them, you know, it may or may not work. It always does, but you know, you wanna keep their expectations reasonable, because some stuff is harder than others, and some people look more athletic than others. The best tip I can tell you is you gotta have the equipment to do it, but just practice as much as you can. Your timing will get better the more you do it. All right, well, that wraps it up. Thank you so much for everybody that's watched. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let us know in the comments below which shots you like the best.